navigate the world as a woman is to constantly be reminded of the imperative for inclusivity and equity. This is why initiatives such as International Women's Day are so very important to continuing to shine a bright light on not only the strides that have been made, but also the way that we have left to go. Today, we commemorate the social, political, and economic achievements of women, even as we continue to advocate for equal treatment and representation. Indeed, to navigate the world as a woman is to be constantly reminded of the imperative for inclusivity and equity. It's worth repeating. This year's theme is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. And the campaign is represented by the Break the Bias hashtag. In this way, Break the Bias is both a necessary call to action and a promise of sustainable development, empowerment, and above all, opportunity. It's against this backdrop that I welcome each and every one of you to this 10 Habitat Forum, not simply as passive observers, but active and engaged partners in an effort to better facilitate and empower women entrepreneurs. I have very recently accepted Selwyn's invitation to lead the 10 Habitat program development specifically geared towards this. And we've already begun crafting a unique offering indicative of the Habitat's ethos. And I use the word ethos quite deliberately insofar as it connotes the characteristic spirit of a culture or community as manifested in its beliefs and aspirations. 10 Habitat is and will continue to be characterized by a spirit of true community that transcends a physical building to be a genuine habitat that nurtures the growth of everyone who shares it, drawing on each other's experiences and inspiring both individuals and the collective to sincere transformation and, where necessary, disruption. It's in this spirit that we will deliver programs that will seek to do much more than train female founders. We recognize the need to identify, confront, and address barriers to entry and growth, both seen and unseen. We acknowledge that there are gender norms, for example, which dictate that our programs must consider and facilitate childcare, equipping romantic partners with skills to support and navigate the entrepreneurial journey, as well as charting a path to financial freedom through financial guidance focused on the transition that gives the employed woman the tools to become the female founder she aspires to, without compromising the well-being and stability of those she cares for. As we continue to craft these programs under my leadership, we want to hear from you. As I said, the aim is to partner with you in meeting your needs. To this end, Selwyn will share a very short survey at the end of this talk and in your emails. We encourage your participation and, above all, your candor in responding. The more insight you provide into your challenges, the better equipped we will be to serve you. Now, having said that, our service to you begins today in this forum, where we've assembled an esteemed panel of women who have been breaking barriers in their own lives and careers. They have agreed to join us to celebrate International Women's Day 2022, break the bias, and critically consider several burning questions, including how do we address the stereotypes and the biases, overt and implicit, that affect women entrepreneurs? Why is this even important? And is the region's future really female? With me today, I have Marla Duperan, recognized as a top economist and advisor in the Caribbean. Marla has become a highly sought after keynote speaker internationally on Caribbean issues and regularly advises private sector executives and multinationals to support their strategic decisions in the region. Welcome, Marla.
Thank you, Shadi, and good morning to you and to all the listeners and to this gorgeous panel early this Tuesday morning. Happy International Women's Day.
I also have Dr. Shellyanne Gajadar. Dr. Shellyanne is a Trinbagonian national currently residing in London and is the CEO of Alpha Stute Limited, a global coaching company catering to over 5,000 clients. She is an educator and a coach who's well known for her professional versatility as a Caribbean woman, her ability to coach high-performing individuals to a more purposeful life, and her personal mantra, go bravely. Welcome, Dr. Shelley-Ann.
So thank you, ladies, and hello to everyone, and happy International Women's Day.
We also have Dr. Janelle Chase Mears. Dr. J is a creative and systemic therapist, a master facilitator, and a current PhD scholar. She is committed to mental health and optimal performance for redefining corporate spaces, businesses, and families. She's also the owner of the Fit Chic movement, which focuses on the integrated wellness of women throughout their developmental stages of life. I've had the privilege of knowing each and every one of these women in different capacities over many years. So it is a distinct pleasure to provide them with today's platform to do what they do best, which is to shine and to pour into others. Ladies, you could have been anywhere this morning, so I thank you for choosing to be here with us.
Thanks for having us.
So let's get straight into it. I know that the participants are eager to hear from you. So I want to start with you, Marla. I've heard you say many times before that the future is female. What does that mean to you in our current context?
What does it mean that the future is female? I think that women, of course, have continued to make strides and inroads in the private sector space, in the public sector and policy making space, in the leadership space. And whilst we haven't gotten to the point we would like to be at, we are making progress. More and more, you're seeing women on boards, women in leadership positions, women in policy making positions. Right now here in Barbados, we have our first female prime minister and our first female president, our first president ever. And in Trinidad as well, we have our first female president right now. And so this is evidence, okay? Again, we're not where we would like to be, where there is equality, but we are making progress, and let us not discount that and forget the progress that women have made. And this is why I say the future is female. As we continue to grow and continue to take on these roles that we deserve, just like men do, and we have earned, more and more, I think as women, we will put policies in place and put systems and processes and create cultures that embrace equality. And I see it happening in many workspaces. I see it happening culturally in many countries and from a policy perspective. And I think the only way is up for us. That's why I think the future is female.
Thank you for that insight. And this is an interactive session. I want to make that absolutely clear. So please feel free, as the panelists are sharing with us, to put your questions in the chat, and we will try to involve you in the conversation. Of course, while I may be engaging a particular panelist, if any of the other panelists want to jump in on a particular point, please feel free to do this. This is a discourse. It's not a formal presentation. We're having a conversation. We are sharing amongst the community. Now, I want to zero in on something you said, Marla. From your perspective as a Caribbean economist, why do we need to place special emphasis on women entrepreneurs?
So Shade, there was research that found in the first place as a region that governments do not create growth. You know, we have this thinking, and of course it's propagated by the politicians who want to spend and to attract votes by spending. They say the only way this economy can grow is because the government has to spend. And that's old Keynesian methodology and thinking that if the government spends, the economy grows. That works in big economies where they actually produce mostly what they consume. We do not produce most of what we consume. So when the government spends in this country, in our region, any heavily import-dependent economy, what happens when the government spends is the government is creating imports, demand for imports. So how do our economies grow then, if not via government spending? There are two main elements of our economies that drive growth: exports and investment. and you need investment to drive exports. We need private sector-led activity for our economies to grow. Governments do not generate growth in our region. They only rack up debt and support the economies of the countries that we import from, like China and the US in particular. So that's the first reason why entrepreneurship on the whole is important, because we need private sector-led activity to generate growth. Now, why women entrepreneurs? So when you look at the labor force participation ratios in this region, men participate to a greater extent in the labor force than women. In most countries, there is about a 10% differential. So you have, for example, 75% male labor force participation and 65% for women in every country in this region except Bermuda, and sometimes Bermuda is not counted as part of the Caribbean, and justly so. In every country, there is more male participation than female participation in the labor force. Why is that, especially when women are more educated in this region on average than men? Why is that when women are living longer and healthier lives in this region than men? Why? Mostly because we shoulder an unfair burden of unpaid care work in the home, whether for children and or elderly. And so this is the main reason why there is less labor force participation for females than males. This is why female entrepreneurship is important, because many of the women who are at home, who are educated, who are motivated, who are ambitious, who really want to make a contribution to their families and their communities can't, because they have responsibilities in the home. But that doesn't mean that they can't also become entrepreneurs if they cannot exist in the formal full-time workspace, okay? And female entrepreneurs do not have the kind of support that male entrepreneurs have. We know access to financing is not as easy for women, and we know that access to the market itself is not as easy for women as it is for men, to varying degrees in various countries. This is why we need to place special emphasis on women to correct that imbalance and to lean in and give women a hand up. And I think that when you look at the gains for female entrepreneurship and female success, it is greater than when men succeed. And here's why I say that. Do you know that 90% of a woman's earnings is reinvested back into her family via healthcare, nutrition, education, primarily? Do you know what is that same percentage for men? How much do men reinvest back into their families and communities? 40%. I don't know what they're doing with that 60%. I wish somebody would tell me, right? So this is why it is so important. It is important for our economies. It is important for our communities. It is important for our families to empower women. And we reinvest 90% back, not 40% as men do. So everybody gains when we are empowered, when women succeed. And, you know, I think that it is such a disadvantage that we are placed at such a disadvantage that it makes sense to overcompensate a little, right? Just to right and correct the imbalance that exists. And this is why I think we need to emphasize women entrepreneurs and the support that we give them.
Thank you so much for laying that foundation, which we're going to build this entire discussion around, because that really sets the Caribbean context. And I want to give the other panelists an opportunity to comment on anything that you've said in that kind of contextual framing. So I'm going to go to Dr. J first and invite her to, you know, give any insights from her professional perspective on what Marla has just shared. Those statistics are a bit jarring. What do you think?
So I love to hear Marla speak, because she speaks language that I don't understand, but she speaks it very feminine. And I want to, and I kind of want to point on there, right? Because there is a difference between a woman who acts and lives in her femininity versus trying to play the game like a man. And I think that's one of the points that we always miss in having conversations about females. And as you asked, Marla, that question in terms of what the future is female, this is what I think. The future is female is that we are more loving, we're more compassionate, we're more nurturing, we're more growth oriented, we're more accepting, we're more authentic, and we're more relationship building, and we're more capable to manage our emotions, right? That's just from a brain perspective, right? So like if we have to do stats, our prefrontal cortex is hardwired to do these things. We literally birth and grow another human being with the help of, right? But it comes through us. And what I found throughout the years, especially as a mental health consultant and a systemic therapist, is that females have turned that word empowerment to a masculine word. And so when you're playing a game against a man who has more strength than you, oh baby, you're not gonna win because their testosterone alone. So it's how do we encapsulate our ability to be feminine in our approach to the work that we do, because that's what the world's missing. They're missing nurturing, right? And we as women often step away from it. And I always think about resources, because you think about financial resources, but going back to Marla's 90%, we can stretch, we can reinvest in ourselves, but we can also reinvest in ourselves when we have more resources of like-minded people. We can also reinvest in ourselves when we have resources in terms of financial stability and understanding. That's why I love to hear Marla speak, because I feel smart after Marla speaks about money. Often when we talk about money, we're not thinking about those statistics that she's sharing as to when I make $100, where's my $90 going? What am I doing with that $10? So it makes sense to me. Also from the perspective of networking, we have the capability to network in spaces that men don't, because our networking is not rooted in alcohol, sex, drugs, or the golf course, which inhibits our ability to press through certain things. And having ran an all-female rehab and having ran an all-male rehab, there's a disparity in how we actually tap into our resources with men and women. But if we keep fighting the male game, you're going to pretty much put yourself in a lot of pressure. And we have a lot of women on here. Hopefully we have some men too. So we may be able to sit at the seat table with men, but are we physically capable to sit there because we're unwell? Because we're still trying to be like going here. And I think that's why nurturance has to be something that we fall into. And then the last part for me, resources, support. You know, as a female entrepreneur, the amount of support that I get from both female as well as male counterparts is absolutely crazy and mind-blowing. I love it. However, if you will look at a man in his entrepreneurial role and what's happening now in terms of the stats, men are easily committing suicide out of their entrepreneurial pursuits because they don't get support. They don't get an opportunity to say, hey, this is really rough. I need help. But we as females, we get an opportunity to say, like, look, I bite off more than I chew. And somebody say, okay, Dr. Shalian, do you have any help for me? And 9 or 10 times they'll go like, oh, but you have a coaching space. Let me get into that space. Let me learn. Let me not fall, because I want to be able to learn and stand on my own feet, because I have so many other people that are looking up to me, and I want to do better for them. So that was just my talk as Marla inspired this conversation.
Well, I actually want to kind of zero in on something you said now about, which you kind of framed it in the opposite way, but I want to highlight that fact that women are more likely to raise their hand and say that they need help. Absolutely. And they're more likely to reach out and say, you know, Dr. Shalian, can you assist me? I have a problem. I really don't know where to go. And that's definitely reflected even in my own client list. You know, when me and Salvin first started talking, I would say to him, my clientele is easily 80-90% female, right? And it's not that I'm not in spaces appealing to men, having conversations with men, but in terms of those who go from the discovery call to actually committing to a program, committing, it's women. And it's interesting that it is also women who may not necessarily be earning so much more disposable income. Again, looking at Marla's stats about how women use their money, but they're willing to make those sacrifices in order to get where they ultimately need to go. Now, Dr. Shalayan, I know you have a perspective not just on what Marla said, but perhaps also what Dr. J said. So I want to bring you into the conversation.
Yes. So I want to add to what Marla said with regards to female entrepreneurship. Why is it important? And I think female entrepreneurship is important because we are creating an ecosystem in which female entrepreneurs have a place. Because if we think about the traditional workplace and the way that the narrative has been going in terms of recruitment to promotion to professional progression, it has not been in favor of the woman. And it continues to be a narrative that we as women find very challenging, not only at the senior leadership level, but also at junior level, right? So you have sometimes students that spend years studying and still grapple with the obsolete ways of leadership, the very autocratic style, and not just as a female, but just as a young person in general trying to make their way in terms of a career. Now, what female entrepreneurship does is it creates an ecosystem that brings inclusivity to the way that we are doing business and to the way that we interact. And I think we don't have that ecosystem in the traditional models of institutions. And what entrepreneurial ecosystem can do for us is provide something that we don't have at the moment. It's very nascent, and I think we can build on that. So that's the first point about why female entrepreneurship is so important. The other thing that I wanted to touch on that Dr. J talked about was the masculinity of women and how we end up masculinizing ourselves as a defense mechanism, but also as a survival mechanism. And why are we doing it? Because the stakes are stacked against us, the odds are against us, and we have to find ways to take up space. And sometimes the only way that we can be heard is to masculinize ourselves. And we have to see that this is not just a woman getting up one day and says, okay, I want to act as a man. Sometimes she has no choice but to do it. And I speak very personally about this because I took up space as a prosecutor for 4 years and predominantly prosecuting in a male-dominated environment. And I had to do that. And it's one of the reasons why I left the profession entirely. But I will say that when it comes to us women really charting our way into the working world, it's really for us to figure out how can we bring our fullness to the table. And our fullness is not just our femininity. Our fullness is also our brilliance, our intellectual prowess, our ability to be kind, gentle, yet assertive, diplomatic, yet graceful. And that's something that many women struggle with. How do we bring our full selves to the table? Is it even allowed? And if it is allowed, to what extent is it allowed? You know, I hear a lot of women say, I have a seat at the table, but I still feel silent, right? I have a seat in the boardroom, but no one is hearing me still. No one is taking anything that I am saying seriously. And I think for us, it's about no longer moving into a space of playing along, but really creating our own tables, creating our own narratives for ourselves, and no longer waiting for institutions or for any person in high authority to give us the opportunity, because we are the walking opportunity.
Great. That actually leads quite nicely into my first question that I have for you specifically, which is you often speak of embracing various dimensions of yourself and going bravely. Why is that important for women in business?
I think that's important for women in business because we live in a multidimensional world, and there is so much of dynamism that we exist in. The world itself is a complex place. So when we ask a woman to be black and white, we're being very unreasonable, firstly. And this is why women feel the pressure, because we don't operate in a playground that is black and white, right? And we hold so many different roles, from mother to sister to friend to senior manager to confidant, lover. And when we look at all of these different hats that we play and that we wear, there is so much of benefits that each one brings. The question then is, how do we bundle that into something that is powerful and something that is transparent and something that is authentic? When we look at schools as well too, and where we are going with education, we're seeing that education is now moving into a space of blended learning, where disciplines are being blended, from engineering to arts being blended into a module. And we're seeing that we're learning in a much more creation culture framework. So we are the creators, we are the alchemists, we are the co-creators of what we are experiencing. So if we are the co-creators and we have this amount of experience, then we do ourselves an injustice by not bringing that to the table. And in the end, we feel the pressures because, again, we're not playing in a space that is black and white. So I think, when I talk about women going bravely and really bringing their full selves to the table, is to let you know that the world is already a complex place, and we understand your complexity. And there are people that need to see that complexity, because for you, in the end, to survive and to stay afloat, that complexity will save you. And a lot of times when we keep trying to be black and white, that's when we feel the pressure, we get into depression, insecurity, imposter syndrome. So I do think the dynamism really helps us.
So further to the point about people needing to see it, you've built quite a social media following, mostly women. In your experience, what are they looking for in terms of knowledge and capacity building? What do they see in you that, they're searching for otherwise?
Yeah, I think what it really comes down to is a sense of belonging. That I belong in this space just as much as my male counterparts and just as much as everybody else that is in the room. I think the woman continues to feel a sense of I don't belong, or a sense of I constantly have to prove myself. And what I've also recognized as well is women have a very hard time negotiating for the things that they need, such as time off, childcare, time for childcare, days off for their mental health. It's a struggle to advocate for themselves within the workplace. So how do we communicate that without being called, she is a, what I'm going to say, or she's an angry Black woman, and all of these different adjectives that we use to describe a woman of standards. So when we peel all of the layers back, I think it really comes down to a sense of belonging and feeling like I no longer have to fight my way in. And even senior leadership, even persons with doctorate titles, for example, women who have gone on to do great things, they've given their life to the field, and yet they're still fighting. And I find that to be very sad. At what point do we stop fighting for a place that we rightfully earned? And then it really comes down to how do we communicate that, and how do we take up space in a diplomatic way, but in a way that says we're not going anywhere.
I really want to turn the discussion to Dr. G. And again, building on the foundation of what Dr. Shelley-Ann just shared, is there a certain mental load that comes from navigating the world as a woman? And why do you think that is? What are some of the coping strategies that you would recommend generally, as well as specifically for female entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. There's a increased mental load just for the nature that we could create a lot of stuff. But I kind of want to go back to something Dr. Shelley-Ann said about the fact that, we fight for our mental health and we fight for time off. And I'm quite the opposite. When I went into our organization, I asked for those things immediately. And I started a lot of programs at the rehab. But it's because I had the narrative, the language, and I had a mentor who was also female. So I'm not big on fighting for anything when it comes into those spaces, because that's where you're going to get your mental health challenges. That's where your incongruence comes from. And so I remember the very first time, that was like maybe 15, 16 years ago, I went to work. And I was like, so this is what's going to happen. I'm going to come work late on Thursdays, just like this. I'm coming work late on Thursdays. I'll work from 11 to 7 instead of working from 8 to 4:30. I think we also need to think about having a weekend off every 6 weeks. And I literally created and made a dynamic shift in that workplace. But one of the things that allowed me to do that is that I had a beautiful mentor who was the head of the clinical services, who I allowed myself to learn so much from her, rather than just saying, well, this doesn't work. Because that's what a lot of us do. We go in spaces where we're like, but this doesn't work. But I'm not in a habit of fighting for something, as Dr. Shadian said, that I know belongs to me. No, I'm not fighting for it. That's like taking care of my child now in this COVID space. There's decisions that you will make, but there are decisions that I will have to make as a mother that I'm not changing just because you believe this is the best thing for my child, because you can't replace my child, right? But I think a lot of that comes from our interpersonal interaction, not only with the women around us, but the men. Because if you see me and my dad, like we go like this, but we're not fighting. My dad raised two very strong women, and not strong in the sense of my back will never break, but strong in the sense that you can have very firm conversations and know that people still love you, and that people don't think ill of you. And so I think when you talk about the mental load, it's that dichotomy of, okay, well, I'm going in here and I'm fighting, but we got to stop fighting. We fight with our bodies every day, right? And we're not winning against our bodies. Our bodies are literally taking us out. When you feel like if you always have to fight, you're going to be tired. You're going to be mentally incongruent. You're going to increase your chances for mental illness to be part of your conversation on a day-to-day basis. And now, because pop psychology works so much better than people who are actually educated about psychology, will say 1 in every this or 3 in every this. What about the 1 in 4 that don't have it? Are you curious about what they're doing? What's their preventative strategy that they're doing? So we're teaching it almost backwards. We're teaching it from crisis model and not a preventative model. And you know how I feel about it. Shadi, is like, we got to do prevention. We got to teach people what they need to know before they go into crisis, because once you're in crisis too long, your nervous system, you could do things in little small pockets, but you're not going to be consistent. You can keep fighting in little small pockets. And then eventually we have a system where everybody is now angry at everybody, and we're not nurturing everybody, right? And that's what creates the mental load and the mental distress and the mental dis-ease, especially for women.
Sorry. So what do you say to the person that says, but Dr. J, you could afford to do that. You're speaking from a place of privilege in being able to set your own terms. Mm-hmm. I can't do that. That isn't an option that's available to me. How do you respond to that?
Privilege is an assumption. Mm-hmm. I came back with a master's with a whole master's, and my boss laughed at me. I was like, I want to make $5,000 a month. And she laughed. She's like, look, we got to make $500 here for you. You taking it? And I said, I remember going home and asking my husband, like, what I do? And he said, Jay, he said, sometimes, and he said it very eloquently that I actually listened. He said, sometimes we have to pay the costs for what it is that we want. And I was going to argue for a second. And I was like, what do you mean by that? Because he was 13 years older than I was. And he was just sharing, he said, even though I'm a man, when I went into my job, people didn't understand what my vibration was bringing. And I attached myself to a mentor who took me along for the ride. And that's literally what I did, And so I learned from that perspective that she wasn't trying to harm me by not paying me, but that's what they could afford at that time, right? And trust me, I knew people's salary. That's what they could afford. But she talks about, but you bring this skill set. So since you build this skill set, are you willing to, I was family therapy at that time. She's like, are you willing to build that out? Well, I'm here with you. And I ended that job, not on $2,500, past the salary that it was asking for and more that I could leverage. But him saying, Jay, sometimes you have to pay your dues. And I say this to a lot of younger women, that I mentor a lot of younger women that have a lot of opportunities, because I played volleyball, they played volleyball. And we have these deep conversations a lot about, you can't fight. It's not about your privileges. Like, what's your skill set? At the end of the day, you could come up with a degree and you still ain't got the experience. Who have you attached yourself to that allows you to grow, blossom, and create? And we're missing that a lot because we're like, well, I should have. yes, you should have, but there's still a skill set that's required for you to actually perform well. And if you don't have that, sometimes you're fighting the wrong fight.
All right. So, Dr. Shelley-Ann, I have been watching your face during Dr. J's presentation, her response to the question. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh no, I absolutely agree with what Dr. J is saying, and I would take it a step further, especially with that skills development point. I think that is something that women in particular should start to prioritize more, to continuously develop themselves and not wait for anyone to develop you. You know, I've worked with clients who are in their jobs for 15 years, 20 years, and have not been developed in any sort of way by their employer, right? And then when the years pass them by and they realize that they can't enter the job market because a lot of their skills have become obsolete, they end up getting into a serious bout of mental health, depression, frustration, overwhelm, because you don't know what's next. How do I fit into this space? So I would say with that skills development point is for us to really prioritize the development of women and also our skills. And skills doesn't necessarily mean that you need to take a course and get a certificate and that sort of thing. More shadowment, apprenticeship, mentorship, being able to have conversations like this, exchange. Don't just sit in this event. Ask a question. Go into people's LinkedIn, send a message. You will be surprised, ladies, how people are willing to talk about themselves if you just ask them. If you want to be where somebody is, because people love to talk about themselves, let's be honest, right? If you ask somebody, how did they get here? You'll be surprised how that opens up a beautiful conversation. But we got to take the first step, and we got to stop thinking that no one wants to help us and that sort of thing. You ask, try it and see. And I get it all the time in my LinkedIn. And I tell people, send me a message, engage, because I want people to know that we are here to help and we want to help. And we are writing our story. And what you may have grown up programmed to believe, oh, well, the old people had it tough, so we must have it tough too. I actually don't like to perpetuate that narrative. No, I'm here to hold my sister's hand and to carry her where I've been and to tell her, these are somewhat blind spots. So try it, ladies, try it. That's my challenge for all of you. Try it. Send a cold email or a message to someone asking them about something you're interested in. You'll be surprised.
Thank you for that advice, Dr. Shelley-Ann. Marla, I want to involve you here as well. I know that you have a lot to share. I actually want to share something that's been shared in the chat. Shelley Foster is saying, I think one of the things that can potentially harm us is when we think we are being underpaid and we set out performing at the level we think we're being paid for. That will slowly kill us. So I just want to add that dimension into the conversation as I invite you, Marla, to share with us on this point.
So much has been said, and I'm just taking it all in. And I also want to agree with what both doctors said about reaching out to people in this space, seeking mentorship, seeking support. I think that it's very important that we allow ourselves to learn. Somebody said that. Dr. J, it was you. I allowed myself to learn from my mentor, because that happens a lot, where we think that you have all these answers, but somehow it doesn't apply to me. But that was a beautiful statement you made there. And so I think I want to endorse those points. I also want to add that it's not necessarily just important to look to women for mentorship and for leadership and guidance. I have been very fortunate to have a couple. Well, one of the reasons is because there are not a lot of leading female economists, right, in my space, or who I have access to. And I've had male economist mentors, and I am most grateful for them. And so let's not limit ourselves to just to female mentors, I think that men also have a valuable role to play. And I think they also bring a different perspective. One of the things I always remember, a friend of mine he's an economist, but also I consider a mentor. And he said to me, you women are held to a higher standard. What I can get away with, you can't. So this is what I did, but don't look at what I did. It won't work for you. You need to do it this way, And so they also have that perspective of how it differs sometimes for them versus us. And I've been told at the board level, I need to be more vocal. I've been told everybody around the room knows that I'm holding back. And so these are the things, the fora, I guess, what I'm trying to say is mentorship comes in different forms, and that kind of guidance comes in different forms. It may not be one-on-one. And sometimes in your peer group, like at a board level, that kind of 360 feedback that we do for each other every year, pay attention to these things. And I was shocked to see people say, I can tell you're holding back. Open your mouth. I thought, I've been accused of opening my mouth too much, right? But it's true, because at that level, when there's so many older, more knowledgeable males in the room, you feel less confident, I guess. I feel less confident. So these kinds of learnings and feedback come from various sources in various fora, and we need to pay attention, listen out for them, and embrace them. You're on mute, Shadi.
Can't believe this deep into a pandemic, I'm still doing that. But I thank you so much for that contribution. I want to again circle back to Dr. J about something particular, because we don't hear about this. We think of this more so in the personal context than the professional context. But what about stresses outside of the normal course of things? Grief, trauma, depression, anxiety, that form part of the entrepreneurial journey, and the fact that people are going through it a lot more than they perhaps care to admit. And I want to engage you specifically on that side of the entrepreneurial journey, the grief, the trauma, the depression, the anxiety that comes along with it sometimes.
Yeah, that's my baby right there. You know that. I just want to piggyback on something that Marla said. She said, she didn't even realize that people picked up that she was less confident or insecure. And I actually think that that's a good thing when somebody could pick it up and say it, because those are elements that tell us that I'm in learned modality. Those are just emotions and feelings. I always think about myself in a relationship after losing my husband at the age of 27. Why was I insecure in relationships? I always apologize to any guy that I was in a relationship with 3 years after my husband died, because I thought everybody wanted to marry me. But I didn't know I had to start over, and I didn't have, so I literally had to put down those skills of being a single woman, and I had to pick them back up. So I think sometimes of being okay with how our feelings are in the moment sometimes gives us the ability to move through the challenges that we're having and not be stuck in the grief and the loss and the extreme sadness. And it's just owning where we are. And sometimes as women, we think that we own things by being emotional, and we're actually emotion filled. However, to be in spaces where somebody can reciprocate and be like, Marla, you're not you today, what's up? It's very, very powerful. And some of us, when we're entrepreneurs, we don't like to share that we're struggling, right? But I could tell you all my business when it comes to entrepreneurship, because it means that there's going to be somebody that can hold space for me, but also it means that I work through my nervous system, right? My fight or flight responses. I get a little nerdy on this, right? I work through my sympathetic nervous system where I can go back to repair and rest, just from a biological standpoint. When you don't work through your emotions or your emotional states and you keep fighting or fleeing them, you actually put yourself at a distinct disadvantage to actually optimize your performance. And so as entrepreneurs, we have a lot of losses. Woo! How many of us have lost money? Raise my hand. Enough, right? Trying out things, right? How many have lost partnerships, friendships because we climbing a ladder, right? And we're like, you come in, man, I can come 6 weeks. I can sign up for Dr. Shelley thing next 6 weeks. Like you come in and then you're like, look, if you're not coming, I'm gonna have to leave you here. And sometimes we tell them and sometimes we don't tell them. But the feeling when we get at the top, we're still feeling alone. We're like, well, I did everything I was supposed to do, but I don't have this partnership. I don't have this companionship, right? So, and then also our sadness associated with our development. And I kind of want to paint a picture as we age. So we're really cool in our 20s. You know, I mentor a lot of younger people. I look young, I know. I'm gonna take that. But I mentor a lot of like 21-year-olds, 27, that kind of stuff. And the vitality and the vibrance that come from them, I'm like, yeah, I want that. And now when you hit about 35, you hit about 40s, like this is too much energy. I don't have this energy. But that energy is also associated with your lived experiences. So the way in which I view fun is completely different from somebody else who's now starting out their entrepreneurship journey. And I kind of have to learn how to temper that with like don't do too much fun, but like, no, like watch yourself with burnout, because if you overextend yourself because you only getting paid 2,500, you can't get vexed when the people ask you for extra 3 hours, right? And we often do things like that. So for me, we do have to be mindful as female entrepreneurs that our system change as we get older, which means our emotional regulation tools also change as well too. We feel more sensitive as we get out of whack with our menstrual cycle. Hot flashes, ladies, let me see y'all in the chat. Our minds work different. Having children, ladies, our minds work different. Managing miscarriages, loss of babies, divorce, right? Our emotional regulation skills look completely different as we age as women. And we have to be mindful of those, because when we're not paying attention to those, things like poor mental health, challenging mental health, declining mental health, mental illness become the things that we have to navigate. And then when you don't have the skills to navigate, or you go to the wrong person, because that's a real thing, where people then say you're crazy. And for any women out here, the word hysteria, that's something that was placed on us as women, because we had a period and we were locked up for that. Mm-hmm. And we were shocked for that. And so having a period is almost a risk in the entrepreneurship world as well too, because we almost feel guilty to rest. No, but boo, you own your own company, rest, boo. Like take the next 2 days off. We gonna be all right. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add to what Dr. J said, because the theme of this is the Caribbean's future female. And I've been thinking about this question, and for me, I think that it can be female if we want it to be female, but there has to be a system in place that is going to allow us to lead, because at the moment we have a system that is fighting us, right, in some instances, and it really stymies our ability to lead from the front. So a lot of times we're actually leading from behind, and it brings up this question of, well, what do we see as leadership as women? Because sometimes we think that because we're leading from behind, it isn't leadership, but I want to say that it still is. You are leading in a different way, in a different form. You're still influencing and impacting. Leading doesn't always mean that you're giving the directives and you're giving the commands. So that's one of the first things about maybe we as women redefine what leadership means and what taking up space for us looks like, keeping our femininity intact and also keeping in mind all of the different obligations that we have. But the other thing I wanted to just mention with grief and trauma and that sort of thing is this is where a coaching culture becomes so important, particularly for organizations. And what is a coaching culture? A coaching culture is one where organizations have a strategy that is focused on coaching their clients, either their employees, either peer-to-peer or having an external coach coming and checking every quarter on just the mental health of their employees. So it's embedded within the strategy of the organization. And if we don't have that embedding, then we should also look at the way that we're recruiting. And this is a big one, a big one. And it's a one that's so very sensitive for me, because I've seen how unfair and how unkind the recruitment process can be in the Caribbean. You have people spending time writing their applications, writing their heart out in cover letters and never receiving a response. Do you know how heartbreaking that could be for people? I have clients who come and they cry, Dr. Shalian, I sent so many emails and not one response. You're telling me as an employee, you couldn't give this client one response to just say thank you for applying? And this is where we get into this thing of inhumane treatment when it comes to our positioning, not just as women, but just in general within the workplace. Men, women, we all experience it, but we have to see how the little things have such grave consequences, especially for a woman that is struggling with so much already.
Thank you for that, because my next question is actually about, we've been discussing placing a special emphasis on women entrepreneurs, but what exactly should that look like in terms of both policy and practice? What are some of the specific, tangible things that Caribbean, small island developing states can start to put into place to empower women entrepreneurs? And like we said, when you empower women entrepreneurs, they turn around and they empower and feed into the community, and the community builds up into the nation and the region, and so on, right? We're building a better, more sustainable world, starting with the woman entrepreneur. So in terms of policy and practices, what are some of the things that we, if you had a wish list, what are some of the things that have to be on that wish list in order for us to meaningfully make this possible? I'm going to start with Marla, then Dr. Shalian, and we're going to end with Dr. G.
Shade, I love to quote the late, great Ruth Bader Ginsburg when she said, "I ask no favor for my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks." And that's where we need to start. Like, what needs to change from a practice and policy perspective? Take your feet off our goddamn necks, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, from a policy perspective, lots of countries, many countries have been putting into place a feminism, if you will, of their budgets, like Canada has, for example, of their foreign policy. Again, Canada has done that. Of equal pay, the state of California, for example, has an Equal Pay Act, and they also did an update to that, a Fair Pay Act, which means that you get equal pay for equal work, which means that salaries and compensation have to be transparent and published. These are the kinds of things we need to make sure that we level the playing field. So that's from a policy perspective. And then from a practice perspective. So for example, I'm part of the International Women's Forum, the IWF. And one of the things that we spoke about many times when we've met in the past, and one of the things we try to do is to support women-run businesses. So for example, you need a plumber, why not look and see if there are female plumbers around that you can hire? When it's Christmas time, gift giving time, why not look to the female artisans and the female entrepreneurs that provide a particular service, as opposed to just going online and finding whatever looks shiny and attractive? Why not deliberately use those 90% earnings that we reinvest back into our families and our communities, and deliberately target the female run female-led entrepreneurs and businesses in our community. That's how, in practice, we can make this shift. And I think that it's a lifestyle change. I never really used to think very much about how I spent my money. And now, because I'm trying to be more supportive of female entrepreneurs, I deliberately, and I'm sorry, it's a discriminatory practice in a sense, but I think I need to do that because we have to over-rotate, right? We have to over-rotate to correct the imbalance. Why not try to support women in their businesses by being more careful and deliberate about how you spend? Those are just my high-level ideas on how we can drive change.
Thank you, Marla. Dr. Shelley-Ann?
Yes, I am like beating my parliament desk as Marla is speaking, particularly around the funding aspect. So to answer the question, I think we can do this at 3 levels, micro, meso, macro. So at the individual level, at the organizational level, and at the state level. If we start with the state, I 100% agree with what Marla contributed, which is we need more deliberate pumping of funds for female entrepreneurship. Jamaica has been doing it. Jamaica has a boosting innovation fund that is specifically targeted for female entrepreneurs. The IDB Bank at the moment, they have an innovation fund that is specifically targeting female entrepreneurs. And we have to start to advocate for it. And the private sector really has to champion in some way, because if we keep trying to do this on our own, it's just falling on deaf ears. So we have to bring people on board for this cause. At the organizational level, someone said it in the chat about employee assistance programs. And I think that would bode well for the general umbrella of a coaching culture, starting to bring a coaching culture within the organization, peer-to-peer coaching, external coaching, wellness walks, wellness retreats, mental health day. We need to bring it in and not just focus on just females, but everyone is included in the mix. And the final thing, which I think we need to see more of at the individual level, is activating our activism. Now, as individuals, you know how they say, be your brother's keeper? I think sisters, we need to be our sister's keeper. And I would love to see more social enterprises being formed. This is how we take our power back. There is a lot of developmental work that needs to be done within our economy, within our region, and the government is not doing it. And it's a great opportunity for young talent to come in and do it. As a matter of fact, my PhD on public management, this was the finding of my PhD. Social enterprises are here and they can do very great things because it involves community. And if there's a woman in here that wants to create a community for women, there is a cause that you feel called to do, I empower you and I encourage you to do it. Get in touch with my business. I'm happy to support it along the way. But we need to take our vision into our hands and say, you know what, if we do it pro bono charity, it's okay. At least we are answering the call in some way. So get up and do what you are here to do. And let's no longer keep waiting and waiting and waiting. The time is now.
Thank you so much, Dr. J.
So for me, my 3 points would be, and kind of encapsulate some of the things that both Dr. Shelley and Marla said. I'd start with just the wellness of the woman. If you don't know, you don't understand who you are, how your body works as a female, you cannot perform well. You cannot experience life well. So I would say for a policy level, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean from a physiological standpoint, a biological standpoint, all of your systems? Because as you age as a woman, and I saw somebody put in the chat earlier about, being perimenopausal and menopausal and how that actually changes the dynamic of her approach to as entrepreneurship. So for me, it would be to start that first. And then financially literacy, but financially narrative. When Marla speaks, I'm a sponge because I don't know that language. And I don't know that language unless I'm in rooms with that language. So therefore, I can't ask for what I don't know I'm supposed to be asking for.
Yeah.
And I think as women, that's my theme for 2022 is about financial narratives, not just literacy, but getting in spaces where people are talking about return on investment, that people are talking about this particular dollar and how this thing actually impacts, because I don't know it, right? If I've worked for organizations, I'm not an accountant. So I don't know these things. So I think that's one of the key. If we want to make more money, we have to understand the language of money. We have to understand the language and how we interpret the skills of how our money works for us. And the last one, and people know this about me, building your tribes. As a woman, you need to know who to go to. We're 4 women on this panel, and we all have distinctive skills, right? And what we tend to do is to go to one person to solve all of our challenges or teach us all of our skills. And when we learn how to tap into asking for help from different perspectives, I tell people I have a fitness tribe, I have a vet tribe, I have a relationship tribe, I have a scholarly tribe, I have my doctor tribe, I have my mental health tribe. I can go every particular tribe, and I'm not tolerated, I'm celebrated in every single space. So we have to be mindful that sometimes we're tapping into spaces as women that we don't need to be tapping into. We need to go to the sources that can actually feed us and actually allow us to create larger female entrepreneurship entities without the struggle that comes from fighting, but with the struggle that comes from learning. Because as long as you're human, you're gonna have to learn, heal, and grow. So,
Thank you all so very much. I want to share a few questions that actually come in from the participants. I am going to start with Leanne's question. Coaching has become a very popular investment that people are increasingly wishing to take up. I am someone who would like to invest in coaching, but the prices are often out of my current budget. So I am saving up towards this. In the meantime, do you have any suggestions beyond reading, watching YouTube videos, etc., as to what I can do to enhance my knowledge and authenticity until I can afford individual coaching?
Yes, I'll take this question. Yes, thank you so much, Leanne, for asking that question. And I think we gotta first just draw this back to, what is it that you're desiring? Because coaching is the channel, but coaching is just the channel. It's not necessarily the destination. So what is the destination that you're trying to achieve? It could be that you want to increase your knowledge, increase your self-management, your self-mastery. And I think there's a lot of different ways that you can do it, which costs $0 and 0 cents. And it really comes down to one, the company that you keep. So that's the first thing, the company that you keep. And the second thing is, have you asked for help? Right now, before I got into the coaching arena, I only got into the coaching arena about 4 years ago. Before doing that, there was a lot of questions that I was asking. I was literally a sponge. I would go into spaces. Sometimes I would go into spaces which I don't even have any background in, and just sit, just plop myself down and just sit and just listen, because I kept myself open to just possibility. Whatever was able to expand my mind, I know in some way that it would also expand my heart, expand my vision. And another thing I would say is, in the Caribbean region in particular, to have big dreams, it can be difficult. Why? Because to be what you dream to be, sometimes you need to see it. You have to visualize it in some way. You can't, it becomes hard to become what you've never seen, right? And that was a big struggle for me. I knew I wanted to do something different, but I just was not seeing it. And I started, and this was one of the key reasons I started to go into different spaces, ask questions, and be honest about where I was at. I was recreating my career at that time, and I wanted to experience something different. And this is why I say you'll be surprised how people are willing to take you under their wing. And I would say that YouTube and all of those videos, it's great. But if you can get someone who is at the place where you would like to be, and you could have a virtual coffee with them, or you could have an exchange, I think that goes a long way. because at least you know that I am seen and it is possible. And if you don't get it, keep trying, keep sending out messages. I used to sit down at LinkedIn and I would send sometimes 15 messages to people. At that time, I wanted to get into consultancy. And praise God, one person got back to me. And that kept me going. That just kept me going. So do not be afraid to put yourself out there. And most importantly, be teachable. Know that, just because somebody has reached where they are going doesn't mean that they know it all. And, it's this exchange. Yeah.
I think that is such a good piece of advice. Everything you said, but that point about being teachable, because sometimes we can place roadblocks in the way of, we can block our own blessings, right? Sometimes people are willing to pour into us, but if we are not receptive, we don't always get what is available. We have another question coming in from the participants. Sandy Bell is saying, participating in the panel discussion is a Cape entrepreneurship class, all female. In retrospect, what advice would you share with your 17 or 18-year-old self who sees entrepreneurship as a potential career path?
I guess I could say that. Advice I would have given myself would be to seek mentorship sooner, right? As soon as I hit like 17, 18, latch on to somebody and be like, yeah, I want to do this, rather than minding my friends, which weren't too bad. That would be definitely the advice. And I think part of it would be to be gentle with what I wanted to accomplish. Because I think at 17 and 18, depend on the culture that you grew up. So I'm not growing up in at 18, I would not have been growing up with the social media world, right? But I would have been growing up.
Thank God.
Yeah, it would not have ended pretty for me. So I'm really grateful that I'm a little bit older there. But I think we would have been in the magazine, or like Dr. Shadian said, like sometimes we didn't even have a perspective. And because we didn't have a perspective, we would almost dream and be imaginative until somebody said to us, you can't do that though. I think I would have kept what I wanted to do a little bit more private, so I can allow my dream to have legs. And I think that's attached to a mentor, which is different from your parent, because our parents are so scared when we're 17 and 18 that we're going to mess up. So they tell us, no, that's not the route for you, because that's their own personal fear. And I tell all my younger mentees that are between the ages of 20 and 24, I say, your parents are still just trying to protect you. Like, it's not that they don't want you to be successful, but they've never seen the level of success that you want. And so therefore, learning to tell the correct person but what that dream is, so they can be your hype man or hype woman, that would definitely be what I would say. Because as an entrepreneur, I actually had to stop telling my mother when I opened up my gym. I legit and talked to my mother for business for a year. I spoke to her on other things, helping me parent my son, helping me run the household and stuff like that. But when it came to my business, I could not have a conversation with my mother, because I felt like if I had to over explain. And so I tell every person that I mentor, your vision is not designed to be shared with people. Your vision is designed to show people what it is, and they'll come along. Unless that person is my hype man, I'm not sharing it with you. Mm-hmm. So that would be the thing, because we got some Debbie Downers, not because they're trying to be difficult, but because that's their own personal experience, and they don't know how to get, people can't get excited for something that they don't even get excited for themselves.
Thank you so much, Dr. J. Marla, what would you have told 17 or 18-year-old Marla?
I'm not sure I could say that here, Shaq. It's very difficult to say, because that's what I'm trying to also give to the message I'm trying to give to my children. Truly, we are our best friends and our worst enemies sometimes. We are the ones who hold ourselves back. And I think that now in my 40s, I can see that, we contribute women, but maybe people in general, to playing small. And, little children, when you ask little 3-year-olds, what you want to do, they always have the biggest, most grandiose ideas. They want to be astronauts, and they want to be, the biggest, they want to be superheroes. And that's the way it should stay, because society, the education system, even, people in your family, they box you in and they make you feel limited. And I feel like that's a huge disservice that we do to each other and to the younger generation and to ourselves. I would say to my younger self, don't think small, don't play small, don't underestimate yourself.
I would certainly tell my 17 or 18-year-old self to bet on you. Every single time, bet on you. You'll either win or you will learn, but bet on you. Dr. Shelley-Ann, I want to give you the final word.
Yes, that's a beautiful question. And for me, I would tell my 17 or 18-year-old self to hold on to your dream, protect your dream, show up for your dream. You did not choose the dream chose you. That's what I would tell myself.
Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. I want to thank each and every one of you for participating so genuinely today on this panel. I want to thank everybody who has joined us. As I said at the beginning, you could have been anywhere in the world today, but you chose to be here with us. And we thank you so very much for that. I want to encourage you to follow 10 Habitat on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Sign up for our newsletter. We're going to be sharing lots of information about the Women Entrepreneurship and Development Program as we build it out. We also definitely want your feedback on that survey so that we can craft programs that are catering to your specific needs. Is going to also help us in prioritizing those needs based on demand and making sure that we're crafting something that, as I said, is not just about training, but is about giving you tools, giving you wings to realize your dreams. We really want to partner with you for success. So again, thank you so much. And I'm going to borrow Dr. Shelley-Ann's mantra. I encourage you to go bravely and to lean into your dreams today. This is International Women's Day, and give yourself permission to shine and to pour into others. Have a lovely morning, everybody.